everybody, and welcome back to PandaCast. I am Rainbow Red Panda, and today we are talking about the worst storylines of wrestling in the year 2020, according to me. I have 3 podcasts left in the year, and so the next 3 are all going to be sort of end of the year things. The last one will probably be 2021 predictions. And so I just want to wrap up the year, this episode, by talking about my least favorite storylines of the year. I think in my list I have a little bit from every company, but it's a list. I think that there definitely are some storylines that I forgot about that definitely should be on this list, but they were just so bad in my mind that I forgot about them. So if they didn't make the list, I'm sorry. It's not that I thought they were great. Feel free to let me know if you think that I should have added anything else, and we can discuss how I forgot about it or how it really was bad, or maybe I did like it. There are very few times where something bad in WWE or another company happens and like everyone in the world hates it, but for some reason I really like it. It doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. So it is possible that I was into stuff that other people weren't. But for the most part, these are my worst of 2020. I tried to get at least one thing from every show. I don't know that I was successful, but it just, I didn't want to be on here forever. And the first one that I want to talk about, I was going to go back and check. I'm pretty sure that it happened in 2020. I know that it was definitely pre-quarantine, pre-coronavirus shutdown, but I'm pretty sure that it did happen in 2020. And that is the Animal in the Cage storyline that they had with Eric Rowan. This went on for, I would say, at least a month. I want to say like maybe 2 months. And to me, they could have done something good with it, but it just wasn't right. If you didn't watch WWE in this time, I guess you didn't miss much. But Eric Rowan basically had this like crate that had something in it. You didn't know if it was like an animal or if he was carrying around like a trinket or what was going on. It was like completely covered in this fabric type stuff, and it had a door, and it was sort of led to believe that it would be some sort of animal or some sort of living object, but you never really knew exactly what was going to be in it. And then eventually you had like him backstage looking at stuff and people being curious and being like, oh, like what's in it? And like he would show them and they would freak out, or they would, after his matches, he would like make people stick their hands or something into the cage and they would like be bloody and like injured. And in a very anticlimactic way, it was then later revealed that there was a spider, a very fake animatronic spider in the cage. And then the next week, the cage was very quickly squished by the steel steps, and then it was gone forever. And Eric Rowan was gone pretty quickly after that. I believe that was literally like 2 weeks before he got released. So this storyline, this kind of stuff is definitely not new to professional wrestling. They've always had things like this where like there's a mystery thing, whether it be a mystery object, a mystery person, a mystery animal, mystery, like there's tons of mysteries that have happened in the WWE, and animals have been used successfully in programming. However, this to me was just not one of them. It wasn't a very interesting storyline. I think that it could have been done so much better and so much more effectively. It could have actually been interesting, and just the writing, along with, you could tell, I feel like Rowan himself wasn't even super interested in it, and it just had so many issues. The next storyline that I just wasn't totally into was the bunny turning against the Butcher and the Blade and then going and being with QT Marshall and the Nightmare Family. Now, this could have been done in a really good way. And even the way that it ended terribly to me. So in the beginning of AEW, the bunny, Allie, was with the Butcher and the Blade. And in real life, Bunny is married to the Blade. And they didn't really highlight that aspect, and it wasn't like Bunny was romantically involved with either one of the Butcher or the Blade in the AEW storylines, but she was always with them. And then all of a sudden, she was just kind of like checking out QT Marshall, checking out his matches, being ringside, being sort of this like shadowy figure just there. And then they sort of did a thing where like they had crushes on each other. She was sort of seen as maybe somebody QT was maybe going through a midlife crisis, so she was helping him by like making him spend all this money and getting all these things that he didn't need and couldn't afford and all this other stuff. And a lot of the Nightmare family was very much not into her, was warning QT. And then eventually it seemed like she was semi-accepted. Her and Brandy Rhodes had a tag team, the Nightmare Sisters, which really did do fairly well. And then all of a sudden, when the attack by the Dark Order on the rest of the Nightmare family happened, Bunny was sort of nowhere to be found. Allie was gone. And then all of a sudden, at least to my memory, she was just sort of put back with Butcher and Blade. And they didn't explain it at all in the beginning. It was just like, oh, Bunny's back. And then on Dark, they sort of explained her talking about like how she just used QT and all these other things, and they sort of tied up the loose ends, but I really think that it definitely could have been done a lot better, because when Bunny was first put in with QT, I was thinking they're doing this for a long-term story where Butcher and Blade have sent Bunny to infiltrate the Nightmare family, because eventually maybe QT and Dustin or something like that will be the tag team champions, or something will happen that the Butcher and Blade are very interested in that is happening with the Nightmare family. So Bunny will be sort of their mole. And from there, Bunny will eventually turn on QT at a pay-per-view, during a match, that kind of situation. And I could have even seen her and Brandy having their successful run, and then eventually Bunny turning on Brandy by, costing them a match. Maybe it goes like a really long run and there are women's tag titles and like that kind of a situation. But the way that they did it, it was like, it just didn't make sense. Like any other way would have made a lot more sense. And they did explain like the Bunny and QT, but I feel like I've never gotten the closure of the Bunny and Brandy. The Nightmare Sisters, I feel like they never got their closure. They have since kind of put Brandy either as a solo act, now feuding with Jade Cargill, or they put her and Red Velvet in a tag team together. And I feel like Brandy needs to have this sort of feud with Bunny, because it's sort of like, hey, you were my partner and then you screwed over like my family. Like, I don't understand why they didn't do something with that, as well as do more with the QT angle. And like I said, I think that it should have just been done a lot better. So like, it was a good try, but it was just really bad execution. So I mean, maybe down the road there will be something that comes and it better explains everything. But for now, I wasn't happy with the way that the storyline ended, and it wasn't really done as well as it could have, which is weird because AEW tends to be fairly good with that kind of stuff. I feel like Tony Khan is somebody that just has had his whole life to just put all these different things together, and this is the best that everyone in the company came up with, and it was just definitely missing something. The next storyline, which is an ongoing storyline, and I don't know of anyone that really likes this storyline, is the whole angle with Retribution. Now, Retribution came out, I feel like they're pretty new, but if you think about it, they've been around for like a few months, multiple months. And it started out, lights going out and them panning to like just these masked people in all black. which first of all came out in the worst time, like in the peak of the George Floyd Black Lives Matter movement, where people were talking about these protesters and how protesters are just evil rioters and just destruction and bad. And then you have these people that they don't really talk about their race or anything like that with Retribution. They were dressed head to toe in black, so you couldn't necessarily see their skin, but it was just like having them sort of be a rioter. It just wasn't good in that aspect. And then also them there being so many of them, and then all of a sudden they went from being like all of these people to like 5, and then it was 4, and then suddenly Mustafa Ali comes back, and then all of a sudden he's thrown into Retribution, and it was just very, very messy and very, very sloppy. And also for the first like few weeks leading up, then there was pay-per-view, and they weren't on the pay-per-view. So it's like, okay, so you're going to have them attack all of the episodes of Raw and SmackDown. But, and I don't know, I don't think they ever attacked NXT, but it was just Raw and SmackDown. And they never did anything on a pay-per-view, which would have made so much more sense. And it just isn't a good, and now like they're wearing masks, so like you're not supposed to know who they are, but like everyone knows the members of Retribution and who they are. And then the whole Mia Yim angle, which I was very excited to see her move up, but I feel like she really deserved a title run as the NXT Women's Champion. And I think that she deserves to be used a lot better than being called Reckoning and Retribution, because it's just not working out. It's just not a good angle. I feel like they were thrown together very sloppily, and it wasn't needed, and now they don't know what to do with them. You know, they were meant to be this powerhouse almost. You know, we've seen this before with other groups in WWE, whether it be like the Nation of Domination, Nexus, so many other groups that come in and just wreak havoc. And they did until they started wrestling, and they really don't win matches. So it's like, wait, you guys are supposed to be this scary bunch, but like there's nothing scary about you. Like, what are you doing? You're just making these really good wrestlers just look bad, you know? And it's like they couldn't even get their stuff together. Like Reckoning is having like this fake seizure in the middle of a ring, and the ref is calling her Mia, which is fine, except for like her name is supposed to be Reckoning on TV. So why are you not addressing her that way? So I don't know if that was like the bad writers, that was the ref's fault, like what was going on there. And yes, Retribution is just, it's not great. It's not good. I would love to see it have been something completely different, and we'll see how much longer it lasts. I feel like every week it just kind of falls more and more apart, and I'm just not excited about it. The next storyline comes from Impact, and it's another one that I think could have been good, and it was a very long storyline. I think it kind of lasted most of the year in my feelings on it, and that is the Rosemary Bravo situation. So Rosemary had been sort of courting Johnny Bravo for most of the year, and the main storyline took place inside of Wrestle House, which I actually didn't mind Wrestle House because I think that it gave a lot of people screen time when you only have a 2-hour show and you can't use everybody. I think that having people, you know, having this pre-recorded thing, one, it keeps everyone away from large groups during like a really big time with COVID, and then it also just brought a new dynamic. And I liked the Rosemary Bravo thing up until the wedding. Like the whole Johnny Bravo getting shot thing, I feel like that shouldn't have been a thing. Like you brought back Father James Mitchell and you did all of this stuff, and then he just gets shot, and then it's just over with. And then all of a sudden Rosemary wasn't interested in him at all, and just it just, the way that it ended, it was just like it was going, and then it just like fell off a cliff. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes, but it's like Bravo has been with Taya Valkyrie forever, and now like he's not with Taya anymore. Rosemary is tagging with Taya, but yeah, Johnny still has Mr. Mundo, and it just doesn't make any sense. I don't understand why they like pushed this kind of like weird love story, and then all of a sudden it's just like, okay, he shot, he didn't die, and this person is just like, I was never interested in him, whatever. Which, I mean, obviously Rosemary, it was obvious that like she wasn't head over heels like love of my life thing, but like just it just wasn't, it just should have been better. And yeah, it could have been better, and it just dropped the ball for me. The next storyline comes from AEW, and it's another one of those that the main reason that it didn't work out was because of the coronavirus. And I totally get why it didn't work, but I still think that it could have been written off of television better. And it is still one of those things that whenever they talk about it, they say like, this is still gonna happen, and that's probably why it never really had an ending. But it was the Elite versus the Inner Circle. It was supposed to happen in New Jersey at Blood and Guts. I was supposed to go, and I was so excited about it. And so the Elite, with Matt Hardy being, I think Matt Hardy was taking over for one of the Bucks at the time because they were injured. I don't remember which member of the Elite Matt Hardy was subbing in for, but it was supposed to be the Elite versus the Inner Circle in a Blood and Guts match, which is sort of like a War Games type of situation. And I was so excited for it. The way that they, were going about it, it all made sense. And then all of a sudden, coronavirus hit. They couldn't record in front of people anymore. There were no fans. They didn't want to do this caliber of a match in front of nobody. And then also, I think the spaces that they were in, they really couldn't do them in those sized spaces either, because like this time when it was supposed to be going down, they were recording at the Nightmare Factory Training Center in Georgia. And during those times, not all of the Elite and not all of the Inner Circle were present, so it wasn't something that they could really write off. But I feel like they keep saying like this match will happen. Like whenever we do go to New Jersey, it's still in the plans to have it be for that event. And I feel like it just doesn't make sense in this moment because there's not really a storyline. And also the Inner Circle, I don't know how much longer they're going to be together at this point, because they brought in MJF and Wardlow and they're not getting along. There was the ultimatum this past week. They decided to stay together, but I really think that Sammy is going to end up leaving sooner than later. He's going to turn face, and the Inner Circle is just kind of going to be downhill from there. So by the time New Jersey rolls around, this may not even be an option. It might be like the Elite versus the Dark Order. I don't even know that the Elite, the Elite is very broken at this point. At this point, War Games, Blood and Guts might be like AEW versus Impact. That would be cool, having like a team AEW, maybe like a team Omega or something versus like a team, I don't know, right now I guess if it's champion versus champion, it would be Team Omega versus Team Swan. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. But either way, good storyline. Coronavirus ruined it. And it just kind of made it not so exciting for me. Next one, WWE. I feel like a lot of these are just WWE storylines, but they have so many writers. I'm like, the company that has the most writers are the ones that have the worst ideas. Like, why? And it is sort of going in with the speaking out movement that I talked about a couple podcasts ago. Like I think I had mentioned there were some accusations that were made against Matt Riddle, and it is not clear who is telling the truth, or if they're both telling their truths and their truths are just very different because they lived the situation differently. Matt Riddle was accused of some sexual misconduct and then also blacklisting a woman from WWE events. I believe she was training in the Performance Center. She was a member of some of the other organizations that WWE has acquired, and she was sort of not able to do any of that anymore because in her eyes, Matt Riddle had told them like, hey, like I'm having issues with this girl, like don't let her be around us. And I don't know, no one knows besides like the parties involved. And it's sort of like he said, she said, there may or may not be lawsuits. I really don't keep up with it that closely. Matt Riddle eventually came out and said, no, like this isn't what she's like, what she said happened, but it was a consensual affair. I cheated on my wife. It wasn't like a sexual assault or anything like that. Like, you know, here's my proof. She has her proof, all this stuff. And one, Matt Riddle, during this investigation process, some of the wrestlers that were accused were just instantly fired. And some of them, like Matt Riddle, he was one of the most well-known names that came out. And instead of even just taking time off to assess the situation, he was moved up to SmackDown. He had his debut on schedule, and he really wasn't affected by this at all. And I feel like that was WWE dropping the ball, because what if it did come out later that like he did do these like horrible things that he was accused of, and then you're just continuing to keep him on TV and pushing him and like promoting him. But because of all these accusations that came up against him during his feuds with Baron Corbin, they sort of used the affair as part of the storyline. It was part of a promo, and I believe part of a tweet talking about Matt Riddle and sort of talking about the affair, mentioning his wife and all these things. And to me, like, it's not the place for it. Like, you don't need to bring that into it because it's not as relevant to this. Like, yes, back in the day with the Edge and Matt Hardy and Lita situation, like they were all three very popular wrestlers in WWE at the time. And it, you know, you know the stories. If you don't, please Google it, I guess. But this Matt Riddle thing, it just felt cheap. It just felt like they're trying to bring attention to a situation that doesn't need to be brought attention to. You either know about it or you don't, and you should just not speculate. You know, it's not something that needs to be speculated about or made light of, because it's a serious subject. Regardless of what happened, it's still a serious subject that affects actual people's lives. And I just didn't like that. I didn't like how he was pushed so hard, and then also them using the actual affair or whatever it was in the storyline. Because what if it came out that like she was a true assault victim, and then they're sort of promoting it in the storyline? Like, it's just very cheap. The next one is another WWE, as I said earlier, and this was probably the most drug-on storyline. It went on for most of 2020, and that is the storyline of Seth Rollins and Rey Mysterio. And to my knowledge, this whole storyline started when Becky Lynch announced that she was pregnant, and Seth Rollins was backstage. Rey Mysterio went up and like congratulated him, and it just went from there. Seth Rollins just kind of went crazy. They had all kinds of weird matches. They had an eye for an eye match. Well, an eye for an eye match, which had like the worst like fake eye botch ever. And that, I'm like, can we just end it there? And then of course they bring in Dominic, they bring in Ray's whole family, it's just feud after feud after feud, match after match after match, and like Ray's family loses like all of the matches. And it's just like, guys, like it's not a good story if it's just so one-sided. It was just like, you want closure, like move on, come on, like we're sick of it, everyone's sick of it. And then they introduce like the Aaliyah, Ray's daughter, having like a relationship with Murphy, and that was just very odd because of the ages. And also it's just weird because like Ray's daughter isn't, as far as I know, training to like be a wrestler, or like isn't somebody that's going to be in the wrestling business long term. And if you go on her social medias, it's very obvious that she has like her own long-term boyfriend, like her real life boyfriend. So for them to put Murphy in the situation It just made no sense at all. I guess it was a way to break up Seth and Murphy, but there's so many ways they could have done that instead. And I just didn't, it just wasn't a good, it just went on for so long. It was literally like almost the entire year. And it was just so one-sided and just so like over and over and over again. And like the stipulations, like the eye for an eye thing, it just was so bad. And I'm just like, are you guys only doing this because AEW had like an eye for an eye thing? Like, is that why you're doing this? Like, it makes no sense. It just, that storyline was just, I love both Seth Rollins and Rey Mysterio, but that storyline was just so not needed. So many other things could have happened. It just wasn't good. Okay, the next one I will do one that is not AEW, and it's not even really the storyline. It was just the outcome of another thing. And to me, Nyla not winning the title back again from Shida, it wasn't my favorite. I liked the build-up. I liked that they put Vicky with Nyla, but to me, the way that they built it up, it was very apparent that Nyla was probably going to win the title. You know, Vicky is a very strong force as a manager, and she made it known, like, you know, she's here to represent Nyla as a champion. And when Nyla lost, and then seeing how Vicky reacted and them sort of having like this disagreement, I thought, one, that Vicky is going to leave Nyla, so then what's the point of even bringing Vicky in? But also, it's just one of those things, again, where like it seems like they're building something up to like be this like just undestructible force, and then like they just don't win. And I love Shida as a champion. Like, I'm glad that she won, but I really expected that match to go differently. I really expected Nyla to win. And it'll be interesting to see what happens now. I feel like now they're kind of pushing Jade as this like unstoppable force with Brandy. And Nyla, I mean, Nyla's doing stuff, but she's not, you know, the main attraction that I feel like they were kind of pushing her to be. So I'm not sure what happened with that, what made, you know, that change. But I really think that as much as I love Shida being the champion and I want her to be the champion, I really think that it was weird them not giving Nyla the title, because it just would have made a lot more sense in the long run. And the final storylines that I have are just Lars Sullivan just shouldn't be, he just shouldn't be in the WWE. I'm not interested. I think that he is a very dangerous wrestler and that he's just not interesting. Them really pushing the name The Freak on him, you know, the Michael Cole thing, saying it like 22 times in one promo. And also just the fact that he was even brought back after, I guess it was an injury or something that happened where he was gone for like months and months and months. It coming out his racist past, as well as the fact that he, I guess, was in some adult content with another man. And then he also had like homophobic issues where he was like, so for his content to come out and him to be welcomed back, it just didn't make sense. And then them trying to push this like bullying storyline, which I think they've cut. I really think they've kind of stopped his push a little bit. Like, they're not doing the interviews as much anymore. I guess to me, he's almost, I've heard other people say this too. To me, he's sort of just like a reincarnation of Gene Snitsky. And I'm just not interested in that, you know? I'm not interested in Lars Sullivan. I wasn't interested before all of his stuff came out, and I'm not interested now. So if they could find something actually entertaining to do with him, maybe, but I'm not here for it. I think that there's so many better people that could be, you know, on TV instead of him, and it just doesn't work for me. It's not my thing. So it's not necessarily a storyline of his, but just him in general coming back and being pushed the way that he was. It didn't work. I didn't like it. And the final storyline, not really storyline, but the way that they're sort of coming out now, it almost seems like one, was back in April when they released all of the superstars and had all of the stuff. And now they're starting to hire back the talent that they released. And it sucked because it's one of those things where some of the superstars, you're like, were they actually released, or were they told like, hey, we're doing this, so we're going to say that we're releasing you, and then it's going to be part of the storyline? Because I know that if you're watching this, you more than likely, you know about the releases, you saw a lot of the videos. I know that Heath Slater had made a video, Drake Maverick made like the saddest video that there was to make, and he still had matches at the time, which is why it's like, I want to believe that he was released and that all of his stuff was completely genuine, because he just seemed like so genuine and just so upset. But the fact that like they allowed him to still wrestle even though he didn't have a contract, and then all of a sudden at the end of it he was allowed into NXT, which was such a feel good moment, and you were just so happy for him. And I love the stuff that he's doing now, the stuff that he's doing with Killian Dane. Absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite parts of NXT. But you know, was that real? Like, was he actually released, or was he not? I've heard a lot of speculation that they released all these wrestlers and the plan was to hire them back at a lower wage, because I guess they had all sort of signed contracts where they were making a much higher wage, and WWE just didn't want to pay it anymore. They would probably say they couldn't afford it, but like it's a billion-dollar industry, like you can afford it, bro. And who knows if that's the case? Who knows if it was just part of a bigger plan? Who knows? Who knows? But I thought that it was very odd the way that some of them happened. I am glad that they have hired back some, but some of them, I think it is the best that could have happened. I think that it's great for Matt Cardona that he is no longer in WWE. I think that it's good for Kurt Hawkins. It was good for so many other superstars that are no longer there. But for some of them, it was like, what are you doing? And yeah, that whole thing, I don't know that it was necessarily a storyline, but it was just very odd the way that it all happened. And the final part of 2020 is something that it wasn't a storyline. You know, it couldn't have been written if they tried. And it was just, you know, the coronavirus in general, it really changed everything in the whole world. You know, it changed wrestling, it changed all sports. And just seeing how everyone adapted and went on with the show, I think it's been very interesting. I've talked about this before, who I think does the best, who I think needs to catch up. And, you know, no one could have written that, but I do think that the way that WWE handled it was not great. I think that they definitely should have handled it better. The fact that they've only even mentioned the words, like they've only mentioned the virus like once on television. It's like there's this whole thing and you're not even talking about it. Like bring a like at least say its name. Like everyone knows. It's not like it's a secret. It's not like, you know, something bad happened and you guys have to keep it a secret. The whole world knows. So at least talk about it. You know, it just seems like they're just so scared to talk about real life events that are outside of, you know, the storylines that the writers write. And it's like, you know, we're all going through it. If you want us to sort of all unite and be a united front, then talk about the thing that, you know, we're all going through. So, I mean, the coronavirus, a lot of the stuff that's on this list, you know, it's the reason that it's on the list, because a lot of stuff had to change. And I think that 2021 will be a better year for stories. And there are still so many great stories. There are so many great storylines. But there were also some really bad ones. So this was what my list was. If you guys have anything that you want to add, please let me know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or you can hit me up on Twitter. You can find me at rainbow_Sarah. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Bye.